Ready to roll if you want to open up to Hebrews 11. I don't think that we will actually adequately cover everything that needs to be covered in Hebrews 11, but I still only plan on doing one class for Hebrews 11, so we can at least just get the feel for what's happening here, and you might have to do some of the rest of it on your own if you want. But is there anything we need to say, church family related, before we get started? I don't know if it's only me. You know, it was a couple weeks ago, it was a lot colder than it is right now. But this cold feels different. I cannot warm up. I've just been freezing the whole time. I need it to warm up. All right, nothing else? That's important as that? Garrett, would you mind praying for us? Amen. Thank you. All right. I think that a real fast running start will help us to be able to do this. When we go through Hebrews 11 tonight, I don't want this to be, sometimes I'll say this, I'm not picking on any one person. This is what I do. Whenever I refer to somebody in Hebrews 11, I'll always say, Hebrews 11 is like a faith hall of fame. And you go to Hebrews 11 and you say, look at this person, and they're listed in Hebrews 11. But what I would like for us to do tonight, and I kind of would hope that all of our conversation can kind of swirl around this thing, and that is, why are these people listed specifically to this audience? Like, what is the message that comes from the people who are listed for the people that the Hebrew writer is talking to? And I think that'll become more apparent as we move through this a little bit. But since we're talking about the people that we're talking to, that list of exhortations that we've spent the last couple classes mentioning is, you know, this is what their circumstances are like. I think it's really important to put yourself in their shoes if you're going to say, why does Abel matter to me? Well, I don't know why Abel matters to you, but why would Abel matter to them? That would be the question that we want to ask in this class. And so a lot of that, let us draw near, let us hold fast. Especially in chapter 10 and verse 32, let us recall the former days when after you were enlightened, you endured a hard struggle with suffering, sometimes being publicly exposed to reproach and affliction, sometimes being partners with them. These Christians are suffering for their faith. And so keep that in mind. And also, I didn't go to the last one, endure, like keep going, keep going. So that's part one of what I would like for us to do in this class. Who are the people and why are the people? That's really the question that I really want to get at. Also, there's one more thing that I want to look at before we start into this list, and that is chapter 11 and verse 39. At the very, very end, we'll start at the very end, because it kind of gives you the conclusion the conclusion kind of gives you the main point of what the Hebrew writer's trying to get at for each one of these. So if you keep this in mind, Hebrews 11:39 says, all these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised. So, we're talking about people who had, who showed examples, burst of examples of faith in their life, and yet still they did not attain the goal that they were striving for in their lifetime. That's going to be really important for this conversation. Anything you want to say before we get started? Looking at the list? All right, so what I'm going to do is throw up as many as I can fit on one page at a time. And the reason why I'm throwing those up there all together instead of one at a time as we go is because I did this. I don't know if this is something that you care to do or not, but all of those, like Abel. Abel is mentioned. Where are you going to find Abel in the Bible? And there's somebody here tonight, there'll be several people here tonight who don't know where to find the story of Abel in your Bible. And so next to verse 4 where it says, by faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, I just wrote my little references down the margin, like Abel, Genesis 4, Enoch, Genesis 5. Just write them in there so when you're reading about it and you want to find the stories, you always have that ready to go. So I throw all those up for you as we go. Okay. Last chance. Anything you want to say before we get started? I'm ready to go. Okay, 11:1. Now faith is the assurance, remember, assurance, confidence, or substance. It is the substance, that's my favorite one, of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it the people of old received their commendation. By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. We didn't see it, but we have confidence that it's true. Okay, number 1 on the list. Verse 4. By faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he was commended as righteous, God commending him by accepting his gifts, and through his faith, though he died, he still speaks. So here's our class for tonight. Why Abel? What's the point of mentioning Abel to this group of people? Yep, Ian.
Abel had a brother named Cain, and they both did stuff, and Cain was jealous of his brother, so he, in order to get revenge, he killed his own brother, but his own flesh and blood. He killed his own brother, just because God said that it was a more excellent sacrifice, and we need to show that even though he did that to his brother, Abel lived faithfully with God.
Yeah. So, why did Cain kill Abel? What was the reason?
Jealousy.
Why was he jealous?
Well, because, as Ian said, Abel offered a more excellent sacrifice.
He did good, he did right. His sacrifice was accepted by God. And so here is a person who did the good and right thing and was killed for it. Like he wasn't killed, for any other reason. It was the jealousy that Cain felt because Cain did the right thing and his sacrifice was accepted. And so this is the sort of thing that I want us to think about here. This is exactly the kind of message that would resonate with the Hebrew audience. They're doing the right thing. They're living their lives for Christ. They're suffering for doing the right thing. And so what better example than Abel to say, look, this is what happens to people when they do the right thing. And I think you could go even farther and say, it was his own brother who killed him for doing the right thing. It's going to be your own Jewish family who comes after you and persecutes you for doing the right thing and living by faith and offering this right sacrifice to God. So there's at least one reason why Abel would be mentioned. Can anybody else think of another reason?
But a lot of people talk about the differences in the sacrifices. I don't know if that's the point, though. I think the point is whatever they offered to God, Abel offered it in faith, which is in contrast to his brother. It reminds me of what the author already brought up in chapter 10 about how the Jewish people for thousands of years have offered and offered and offered and offered, but none of that mattered to God if they did not offer it doing his will, desiring to do his will. And Cain does both. Not only does he give a sacrifice, but the sacrifice was accepted because it was done in faith.
Yeah, that's a good connection too. This is why we're not going to make it through Hebrews 11. But this is the kind of conversation that we could do for each one of these people, not just to say, oh, hey, look, Abel is a great example of faith. No, like, why is Abel mentioned? And it's just the deeper you go, the more flesh it puts on the bones. I think I saw Mark and then Luke.
So, Abel was killed for his faith. And you could say that he was probably the first person to be killed for their faith. And you can say that it's important that it says at the end of the verse that his blood still speaks today. So you go all the way back to the very beginning of somebody dying for their faith, and God still hears what happened. And then in Revelation 6, that is in our daily Bible reading this week, and I sent it out in an email, but it talks about us waiting on the Lord and waiting under the footstool until he calls us.
Right? Until it's time.
Until it's time.
Yeah. You mentioned the blood still speaking. That's Genesis chapter 4 and verse 10, where God says to Cain, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground." Luke's going to make our next comment here, but I would like for you to think about, what does that statement have anything to do with the audience that the Hebrew writer is writing to? Why is that something that we would want to point to?
So the blood of Abel said one thing, it cried out for justice, and then the blood of Christ called out for mercy. So there's kind of the distinction there of what blood cries out for or calls for. But also talking about Abel reminds me of what God says to Cain. He says, "If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up?" God warns Cain, and he still goes through with it. And you kind of think about how God offers that second chance to Cain before he goes through with it. But God will still offer a second chance to those who are getting ready to leave.
Yeah, that's a really good picture. It's like, hey, let's plant that seed in your mind. Hey, are you sure you want to walk away from the Lord? Yeah. I'm thinking on the Cain thing in Genesis chapter 4 and verse 10. His blood was crying out. One of the things that we're going to see as we move through Hebrews, we'll see this even more at the end of chapter 11 and then 12 and 13, is the idea that just because Abel was killed doesn't mean that that's the end of the road for him. His blood is still crying out. And the Hebrew writer is saying that he's still speaking. And so it's kind of this, Rob really likes to talk about the example about when Jesus pointed back to where God said, I am the father of Abraham, not I was the father of Abraham. It's like, what does that imply? Well, I am the father means that he's still alive. Not I was before he died. No, I am because he's still alive. It's the same kind of idea. He died, but his blood is still speaking. And so to the Hebrew audience, later on the Hebrew writer is going to say, you haven't even suffered to the point of shedding your blood yet. But even if you do, that's not the end of the road for us, for God's people. There's more. And so, you know, we probably should move on, but it's the kind of thing that I would really love for you to do with each one of these people, just to think about, why is this person mentioned and what would that have meant to the original audience? Because it really helps open up the understanding for us, I think, to see that. Okay, next, verses 5 and 6, we've got Enoch. By faith, Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death. I know I should just read it, but it's like there's a huge point. Like, we got to talk about that huge point. He was taken up so that he should not see death, and he was not found because God had taken him. Now, before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God, and without faith it is impossible to please him, for whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. So why Enoch? I'm trying to turn really slow, but go ahead.
You and I just talked about this on Monday, so, and this is something that when you did your Genesis class, you really emphasized. I think in the verses you have up there, 5, 23, 20 through 24, we can even go back further than that. This guy lived and he died. This guy lived and he died. This guy lived and he died. This guy lived and God translated him into heaven.
Yeah.
So Enoch, we're not told a lot, honestly, but Enoch did something different than all those other men that are mentioned before him that lived and died. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But he did something different. Obviously pleasing to God.
I think I love the framework. I'm in Genesis 5 right now. If you want to go over there, I don't think you're going to be able to see this. I don't expect that you'll be able to see this. But in my Bible, it's red, and it's so-and-so, Adam lived 930 years, and the red is, and he died, 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 and he died. You can see the red all the way down the page. But then you come to verse 22, and it says, Enoch walked with God. That's different from him living. Everybody else lived. Enoch didn't live. He walked with God. Enoch walked with God. And then in verse 24, Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. And so I said this on our Monday morning Bible study. This is probably one of my most favorite things that I've ever written in my Bible. I love this little thing that goes here next to this one. Enoch didn't live like everyone else, so he didn't die like everyone else. And the idea there, especially for, let me open it up to you. Why is that something that would matter to the Hebrew audience? Why would we include Enoch in this list to this group of people?
They're being called out to be different. They're being different than the Jews were, or wherever, like the Greek influence, and they're asked, and I think if you look at the bracketed by Genesis chapter 4 and Genesis chapter 6, Enoch didn't live in a really perfect, fun place.
Yeah.
Look at the environment and generations around him was not, he was drastically different seemingly than everybody around him. And that's what the Hebrew people are being asked to do. Kind of put your head down, be different, trust in God.
Yeah. And yes, so part one of that thing would be, he didn't live like everyone else. Hebrew audience, don't live like everyone else. But we're suffering for it, and it's hard. And I'm not minimizing. Like, that's a really difficult situation that they find themselves in, that they've put themselves in. And it's true, it's very difficult. But the message to this group of people is, so they kill you. You still don't die like everyone else. That's not the end of the road for God's people who are faithful all the way to the end of the road. And so that picture of Enoch, he didn't live like everyone else, so he didn't die like everyone else, is something that would really, I think, speak volumes to somebody in this situation. Anything else on Enoch? Yep, Jenny?
I should probably think through a little bit more before I start talking about, because I've always wondered the same thing too, like what he walked with God, I don't really know what that means, and also you get to just go to heaven. But then I think of like Elijah. Okay, so my train of thought is just a little bit confused on it all, because I mean, when you look at this chapter 11, it can kind of feel overwhelming, because it's like, wow, these people really seem like, well, at least most of them, seemed like you can look back at their lives and be, wow. And then on the other hand, I can look at them and think, they're just sinners, actually. And so, are we just emphasizing that Enoch went to heaven more than just the fact that these were just, like he said, let's see if I can word this right. They're men of old, so they were examples put in there for us of sinners who did great things that I admire and, like I would like to, be like. But at the same time, not to put too much emphasis on them. I mean, Elijah went to heaven without dying too.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does. Can I do this with you? I want to jump to this one. Hebrews 11 and verse 29. Because this is one that I don't know if you can see my colors or not, but what I've done in my Bible is I do like my subcategory, so I can look down the list and I can be like, okay, I just want to see the list real quick. Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Sarah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. Like I can just see the names really fast. And I missed this one. For a long time, after I highlighted all the things, at some point I was like, wait a second. I completely skipped over this one in verse 29. By faith, the people crossed the Red Sea as on dry land, but the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. So do you see why your comment makes me think about that one? What do we think about the Exodus generation who crossed the Red Sea? Not my favorite group of people in the Bible story, right? I mean, and this, what really matters for this conversation, I think, is that Red Sea generation. That's what all of Hebrews 3 and 4 is about. Do you remember the chapters, Hebrews 3 and 4? They will not enter my rest. Because of their testing and their tempting of God, they shall not enter my rest. It was the quote from Psalm 95. And so, Jenny, earlier in this book that we're studying right now, the Hebrew writer used this group of people to say, do not be like that group of people, because they didn't get to enter in God's rest. But now in Hebrews 11 it says, but look at this, when they were standing at the Red Sea, they passed through in faith. Which is a long way of me getting to, I think, what is the answer. And that's to say, we don't look at any of these people and say, wow, that guy's awesome. We say, that thing that you did is worth modeling. You know what I mean? Like, even the Red Sea generation who didn't enter into God's rest, they still walked through the sea. And it's like, okay, let's do that.
Yeah, and sorry, I was thinking more about how it probably, or it seems like it ties together nice with just, he keeps trying to say that now we have this confidence to try to build them up, because in the chapter before, I think is where he says they went through, the former days, they had gone through so much conflict and suffering, so these people are just feeling really like discouraged and torn
How about if a group of losers like the Exodus generation did something right, so can you? I mean, that's kind of right. I mean, it's not like I'm looking at the Apostle Peter like, oh, the Apostle Peter. It's like, no, he's a man just like us who did lots of dumb stuff, just like I do. And it's like, if he could do some right stuff, I can do some right stuff. It's the kind of, I think that's what you're trying to point at. It's encouraging to see their humanity. Yeah. I see some other hands. Anybody else have one? Yeah, Jim?
Say verse 31 there really exemplifies that point from Rahab.
Another great example of somebody very flawed who said, you know what? I'm going to trust God in all of my problems. You can keep making your comments. I just want to push us forward as we move. Did you have one, Sandy? Or did you just, Noah? What is the thing that we would say about Noah? By faith, Noah being warned by God. I'm in verse 7. I don't remember if I said that. Being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. Why Noah?
I got two things. One, even though we're Christians, we cannot send God say, are you really gonna make my mom not have cancer no more? No, you don't tell that to God. You pray to God and say, Lord, if it's your will, let my mom not have cancer anymore or anybody else.
Do you have another one? You said you had two things?
And then, Noah did the opposite. Noah didn't test God. Noah had faith in God, faith like Noah. And just look at the ark and how God said to make the ark out of this and this and this. And Noah had faith, and he obeyed God, so therefore God listened to him
Yeah.
because he didn't question God.
Yeah, so let's talk about why that would have been such a big deal.
Well, I think Noah's faith, he was patient, because he had a patient faith, because it took him how long to build the ark? All of these people were probably, making fun of him, ridiculing him. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't a pleasant life, the way the world was back then. But he had a patient trust in God, and which is what the Hebrew writer is asking the Jews to do. Be patient, draw near, hang tight, don't give up. Because how easy would it have been for Noah to give up after, 50 years of building this ark, or, and it just took him a long time.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that part of it. That's why Bible class is my favorite. I like class more than sermons because I've got some stuff with Noah, but that thing that you just said, I was like, I didn't even think about that one. Hang on, like hold fast, endure. That's the picture of Noah. I'm thinking of something else though with Noah. What else do you have there with Noah's faith? It's mentioned in Hebrews 11. Yeah, Wade?
I'm not on the same page here, but I'm thinking about the events that are unseen. I feel like Abel and also Noah now are thinking about events unseen, which could be eternity. Right? They're all focused on that one goal. And that faith isn't always necessarily rewarded on earth, but it is always rewarded in heaven. And they're all focused on that one goal.
Yeah. So the idea is, Rob, you're next. The idea is, okay, Noah, sometimes I refer to this without actually turning over there. Look at Genesis 2 and verse 6, just to show you real quick. This comes up a lot with the Noah thing. In Genesis 2 and verse 6, you have the Garden of Eden, and it says, and a mist was going up from the land and was watering the whole face of the ground. And you don't have any record in the Bible of rain until you come to the story of the flood. And so Was the thing that was unseen rain from the sky? I tend to think not. I mean, if somebody is like, no, that's the thing, fine, I'm not going to argue with you about it. It's not a hill that I care to die on. But, hey, there's going to be a worldwide universal flood that's going to cover up even the mountains, and nothing alive is going to survive. Anybody ever seen one of those? I mean, you know, it's like, okay, Lisa, here's what I need you to do. Drop your life, stop what you're doing for the next lifetime that you live, and devote your entire energy to preparing for this thing that has never happened before and nobody's ever seen. And most of us would be like, but Noah said, I haven't seen it, but God said it, and so I'm going to do it. And that's this picture that we're talking about with the Hebrew audience. Hey, you're living a really difficult life right now and suffering a lot for your faith, but it's worth it because there is something at the end of this road. Have you ever seen what's at the end of the road? No, I haven't, but I have faith that it's there. And it's worth doing what I'm doing in this life because I can, even though it's invisible, I can see it with my faith. Rob?
You already talked about it. I was going to talk about the rain and this thing too.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, then you keep on trucking here. You've got Abraham. This is what this. So how about this? I'll just keep. I'll keep moving through my list, but we're not going to have time to look at everybody in the list. So let me just pause here real quick and say, is there one that you really, really want to get to? Especially if it's at the end of the list, let's go ahead and do what you want to do now because we're probably not going to get to it otherwise. Nothing that anybody's just wondering about. Abraham it is. Go ahead, Dave.
One of the things that I appreciate with the writer is that he covers so much of the history of the Israelite people, and he understands the audience and where they're headed. And he strikes on all these chords and then spends a lot of time on Abraham, which a Jewish Christian potentially wouldn't know if, let's say, he was on the outskirts farming community or herdsman community or whatever, and didn't get quite the thorough education of those others that would have known all this history, and he would have at least known Abraham.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's calling all of them, all of the people of Israel to this moment that are Christians to this point.
Yeah. It's not some obscure thing. It's, hey, you remember Abraham? Yeah, I remember Abraham. Let's do that. You remember Noah? Oh, yeah, Noah. Let's do that. Remember that time that the Exodus generation crossed through the Red Sea? They were facing death, but they listened to what God said. Yeah, let's do that. It's not that we're building them up as some sort of paragon of virtue. We're just saying, here's an example of the kind of people that God wants us to be. So Abraham, this is probably one of my favorites in verse 8. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. That's really important because did he? It's like, okay, Abraham, leave your home and your family and your country and everything you know and go over there and I'm going to give you the land. Okay, leap number 1. Okay, I'll do it. He did. And so he packs up and he goes. And then he's like, okay, God, I'm here. And God says, I'll give it to your descendants in 400 years. And Abraham is like, okay. You know, like that's seeing the end of the road, which is what we want this audience to do, which is what we want to do. To be able to see the end of the road.
All of the examples, the statistics and the logic don't look good. So with Noah, you've got 8 people versus however many millions of people going the total opposite direction.
Yeah. Do you know what you're causing me to think of? I can imagine a parent saying this to their kids. And I can imagine Hebrews 11 working like this to this audience. He doesn't, off the top of my head, I don't think the Hebrew writer, that God through the Hebrew writer says this. But it's almost like under the water of this whole conversation is, I'm not asking you to do anything that everybody before you hasn't had to do too. Like, you're not the first one that's being asked to do this life-altering, difficult thing. I would do this. I'm not going to do it right this second. Do something with this in your Bible. Verses 13 through 16, there's kind of like a little gap here where we're going to summarize the point. These, I'm in verse 13, these all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. I really like that point. I don't belong here anyway. For the people who speak thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of that land from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country. Highlight the word better. That's been the word throughout the entire book of Hebrews. Better. They're looking for a better country than right now, than what they're living in. That is a heavenly one. God is not ashamed to be called their God. So you come to the end of this section, and you have three things. Number one is the main point in verse 39. All these, though commended through their faith, so we did this. Jesse, you're listed in the Faith Hall of Fame. Look at what Jesse did. He's commended for his faith. Great. All of these people that we talked about, they did not receive what was promised. Every single one of them trusted and went all the way to the end of the road without getting the thing that they were promised in this life. And so here you are, suffering Christians. Just remember that what you're doing is not for here and now. You've got to keep your eye on the end of the road. The exhortation in chapter 12 and verse 1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance. There's our word. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith. And so, point number 2 is, I wish I had some way to set this up. Let's do this. The window is Jesus. This is my next trial in this life, whatever that thing is going to be. And here I am, all right? And so this is what I want my Christian life to be. I'm looking straight at Jesus, and I'm going to live and I'm going to walk straight towards Jesus, as if this thing is not even here. I'm not saying that it's a pleasant thing to endure, but my eyes are set on where I'm going and what I'm doing. And if you imagine that, you have the best example of all in chapter 12, starting in verse 2, and that is Jesus himself. It says, fix your eyes on Jesus, who, for the joy that was set before him, endured, there's our word again, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. So here's Jesus, here's the Father, there's the cross. And Jesus is like, if I got to go through the cross to get to where I'm going, then so be it. But that's my goal. Do you see why that would matter to this Hebrew audience? Anything you want to say about that? Comments about that?
It's not about that, but
How about this? Look at Hebrews 11 and verse 19. God said to sacrifice your son, and Abraham said, okay. And the reason why is because in verse 19, he considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead. And so it's like, even, I'm going to do this difficult thing that God told me to do. And I don't have any idea how God's going to make it work out in the end. But death is not a problem for God. That means a lot to me, to this audience.
One thing you were talking about, it's comforting to see the humanity of these people, and I'm kind of hitting it from the other direction. I'm thinking of Forrest Gump when he got in the military, and he was the super soldier, because he was the only person stupid enough just to follow the rules of what his superior told him to do. And I look at it from that direction, like God's saying, you don't have to be innovative, you don't have to be smart, you don't have to be any of these things. You just have to do what I say, and it's all going to work out.
Yeah. I love that because you don't have to understand it either.
Right.
You just got to do it. That's the Habakkuk lesson. The don't have to understand it was from Hebrews chapter 10 and verses 37 and 38. My righteous shall live by faith. Perfect. Forrest Gump the super soldier. That might go in my Bible. All right, it's about 1 minute until the end of class. Do you want the last word?
The list of people is probably really nostalgic for a Jewish audience that would call those people their relatives, their heritage. But starting at about verse 33, where the writer drops the names, and whenever you listen to an audio recording of this, this is where the reporter usually starts speaking really fast and really loud and really passionate, because all the warm, fuzzy nostalgia goes away when he starts talking about the ways they died. And I feel like that just has to be a part of the conversation. It's not like these people all lived wonderful lives of faith and their bones were carried into the promised land and everything was great. But when you're talking about the sawing in two and the burn and the tortured, that's how he ends the list. But also within that, kind of whispers in that women receive their dead back from resurrection. That's pretty cool too. And so I love the nostalgia list of all these names, but he ends it pretty powerfully.
Yeah. Yeah. And that list of things that happened at the end is like, that would really hit hard with this audience. Okay, thank you for your participation. Let me tell you what I would like to accomplish on Sunday morning. Maybe more. We'll see. But I would definitely love to get through chapter 12 and verse 5 through 11. And what I would like for you to come prepared to think about and talk about is the idea of how a father who loves his child disciplines the child. In Hebrews 12 and verses 5 through 11 is saying, God is a father who loves us, his children, and so what do we expect from that? Discipline. And I want to think about what the text says, but what that means for Christians in our lives. So that's what the plan is for Sunday morning. Thanks for your comments tonight. Sorry we didn't get to hit every single one of these, but it would just take forever.